Well, thank you very much. Before I start my remarks, half this audience is somebody I know. I think my wife is somewhere around here, Phyllis Green. And then I want to introduce two of my colleagues who went through the Battle of Little Rock with me, Terrence Roberts and Thelma Mothershed. I always razz Terrence because we spent the year pumping each other up trying to get through that year. But I want to make a special point that Thelma Mothershed is a hero of mine, that at any point in time, Thelma could have opted out not to spend that year with a medical condition that would fail stronger people weighing 400 and 500 pounds more. And yet, with all of that, Thelma worked that entire year, spent the year with us, finished, and I think she's an exceptional Little Rock Niner. So give her another round of applause. Then yesterday we were at Philander, and there was a special tribute to Mrs. Bates there. My sister Triopia Washington raised her hand. The team from Bowie State University that's putting together a lesson plan to underscore Mrs. Bates' life. We have the Dean of the College of Education. Where is Dr. Taylor? Is she? Oh, okay. And the other faculty member, Dr. Cometa Harrison from Bowie, who's also here. And then the producer and writer of the film, the First Lady of Little Rock, Daisy Bates, Sharon LaCruz. Where is Sharon? And Sharon, stand up so they can see you. So those of you who did see the piece on Mrs. Bates on PBS, there is the energizer, the organizer, the woman with the bright ideas, and I want to make sure that putting together a feature-length film is not easy, and that Sharon, you truly made a mark in recognizing Daisy as the First Lady of Little Rock. Thank you. Now, to Skip and the school and the students, it's a special moment to be here. This would be Mrs. Bates' 100th birthday if she were with us. And I think that we're on a mission to make certain that Daisy Bates' name is raised to a point that we all will know who she is. Skip Rutherford told you to put away your phones, but I'm going to tell you to take them out. Put them on silent and have them at the ready. I want to talk. I want this to be a conversation between us. Social media will allow me to connect with you all beyond this stage, to interact this speech and see what resonates with you. But most importantly, I want all of you to share what connects with you with your social network. So feel free to tweet, hashtag, Instagram, Facebook post, and share on whatever platform that you want to share with the world. Don't be afraid to use this phone to spread information shared here today. So many deplorable things go viral on the web, And it's about time we take control of the content and share positive and provocative information with everyone in our cyber universe. I want to thank Skip Rutherford and the students for inviting me to recognize that this is Daisy's 100th birthday. I heard Oprah Winfrey once say that educating a black man will help create generations of success. I have a counter to that statement. I believe educating a woman, no matter the race, is a step towards radical change. Now, all around the world, we see the fear that an educated woman causes the little-minded. Malala Yousafzai, a young girl from Pakistan, likely never imagined that fighting for equal education would conversely involve her fighting for her life. Her blog advocating women's education caught the attention of the Taliban, and they chose violent means to try and silence her voice. But when there are greater things meant for you, there's no weapon that can stop you. I watched Malala leave the Jon Stewart show and Jon Stewart speechless as she talked about what spurred her decision not to stand down to the Taliban. She refused to let her voice be silenced because she knew education was the first step to revolution, that if she did not demand more knowledge and understanding of the world for herself and other women, they would only know as little or as much as someone else decided. And you know that recently she won the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, even in Nigeria, the fear of educated women frightened radical Muslims so much that they would rather deny 200 young girls freedom than know that they've cracked open a book. Daisy Bates knew innately what Malala knew. Change has to start with one radical and one bold step. A bold woman that stood at the helm of the Little Rock 9 ship changed the trajectory of this country and changed my life. Daisy Bates was a complex and unconventional woman who has become a forgotten heroine of the civil rights movement. Mrs. Bates dared to believe that she could lead change. In a time when women were encouraged to take supportive roles, she stepped boldly to the forefront in Little Rock. She dared to believe that she was more than qualified to be an entrepreneur, a newsmaker, a leader, a history maker, and a feminist before the phrase was even coined. I stand here today as the product of the bold audacity of an educated, fearsome feminist. Now, Webster describes feminism as the belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities, or perhaps the more condensed version, courtesy of Beyoncé, someone who believes in the political, social, and economic equality of the sexes. Feminism is a hot-button topic, one that litters BuzzFeed and even falls out of mouths of celebrities like Taylor Swift. I believe that many women nowadays do not associate themselves with the term because it brings to mind angry women burning bras. And for women of color, feminism is something that is associated as being mutually exclusive to white privilege. I'm here to tell you the F word is not something that women should shy away from, because the incredible, strong, and masterful woman I knew would not have shied away from the term. Daisy Bates was not soft-spoken nor humble. She didn't ask permission. She told you what she wanted in no uncertain terms. She was no one's assistant. She was the leader. In a compelling speech before the UN, the actress Emma Watson gave an incredible speech on gender equality. And if you have not watched it, I suggest you watch it on YouTube. It's well worth your time. And I'd like to share a few excerpts from that speech that resonated with me. Women have chosen not to identify as feminists. Why has the word become such an uncomfortable one? I can say that there is no one country in the world where all women can expect to see these rights. No country in the world can yet say that they achieved gender equality. And if you still hate the word, it is not the word that is important. It's the idea and the ambition behind it, because not all women have received the same rights. Daisy was born in Huntington, Arkansas, in a small town in southeastern Arkansas. She was the illegitimate daughter of Millie Riley and Hezekiah Gatson, adopted by Orly and Susie Smith after her mother was raped, murdered, and dumped in a local pond by white men from that community. Her father felt overwhelmed at not being able to do anything to bring the men to justice. He left town. She grew up in a loving Christian family that loved and spoiled that little girl. And it wasn't until the age of 8 that she found out the truth of her parentage. A neighbor boy, wanting to get under her skin, informed her that the Smiths were not her parents and the circumstances of her mother's death. Millie was lured away from her newborn baby. She was raped, murdered, and dumped in a pond. Her attackers treated her like she was a useless, disposable object, nothing more. It is a hot poker to her spirit. She was bruised but not broken. It was months after Daisy's parents found out that she knew the truth. After she found out the true story of her mother, she would find herself sitting on the edge of the pond where her mother was found, imagining where her mother drew her strength. She wondered how she felt in that moment of terror. What was she thinking? What were her last words? And she decided in that moment that she would honor her legacy, her fight, and her strength through her life. Her life would be a testimony to her mother. And after that time, Daisy said she would always feel a sense of being on the outside looking in. And that's what gave her that fierce drive and determination. Her aloofness became an air of composure, sophistication, and glamour, even in the midst of chaos. Daisy, in my opinion, was Olivia Pope long before Shonda Rhimes created the character. No, Daisy was not a wine-drinking spitfire having some torrid affair with an elected official. However, she was a fixer, someone who did not shy away from controversy. Instead, she shaped and molded it to a beast she could tame. I remember during the crisis at Little Rock, Daisy would host reporters from around the country at her home. She would see how the story was being portrayed in their particular market and would find a way to shape their story in the best way possible for our benefit. She would debrief them with information they may not have and use what they knew to aid us in our time at Central. She was one fierce gladiator, and she did it all without Huck. Daisy had a working relationship with the vice principal for men at Central High. That was not publicly known. He kept her abreast of what was going on with the teachers, students, and our academic progress. He was her man on the inside. I wanted to go to Central because I believed they had great science facilities. At Man, we sometimes had hand-me-down books and secondhand science equipment. It was certainly separate and far from equal. And physics was a class that was offered only at Central, not at the other schools. I envisioned a future in the field of science. It was what I looked forward to every day as the first day of school approached. With all the legal wrangling going on between Governor Faubus and President Eisenhower, we missed the first 3 weeks of school. And when we did finally get to attend classes, I was tearfully informed by my physics teacher that he had given 3 weekly quizzes and I had received an F on each. Plus, I didn't have the book and the handout materials. The possibility of failing the class and not graduating loomed as a very real possibility. The very thing I went to school for was turning out to be my stumbling block. Every day in class, was having a hard time understanding the material, and I felt myself slipping further and further behind. I was trying hard not to let anyone know my fear of failure, and I felt as though I was living up to the low expectations the mob and my teacher had for me. So one day after school, Daisy asked me to stay behind after the others had left. She said, "Ernie, is there anything you want to talk about?" And I couldn't bring myself to confess my failing grade. Finally, she looked me in the eye and told me she knew I was failing. I told her I would be willing to drop out of Central, return to man, so I wouldn't bring failure on the program. I didn't want to set a precedent for failure. I didn't want to be an example they pointed to, proving that we couldn't cut it. She shared with me her personal story that I still think about. She said at the age of 9, she was abruptly informed by a neighbor boy she was adopted and her birth mother had been murdered and dumped in a nearby lake. She would steal away by herself and go to that lake and sit on the bank. Daisy would think about her mother. Was she afraid? Did she cry out in those final moments? And as she sat on that bank staring at the water, she made a vow to herself that she wouldn't be afraid of anyone, and she would dedicate her life to pursuing equality and justice for all disenfranchised people. She took my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "It was my duty not to give up. If I give up as a lone senior, those against integration who spread lies of the inferiority of African Americans, my giving up would be a win for ignorance and hate, and I would be validating the prejudice with my willingness to leave. Don't give up, believe and trust in God," she said, and she would do everything in her power to help me succeed. And she proved to be a woman of her word, because within 2 days, she found a professor of biophysics from the University of Arkansas Medical School who tutored me daily. You could say she was our Hey Mitch and I was her Katniss. You got to know, that is the age gap between those of you who know what I'm talking about and those who don't. So when you go home, you ask your kids, what did he say? We either succeed or hope for equality would die with us. And in some cases, our lives really were on the line. I went in as tribute, but not without her help and guidance behind the scenes. I wish I could give this story a Disney movie ending and say I received an A. I wish I could tie it up with a bow of ultimate triumph, shaking my professor's hand as he gave me his mutual respect. But I did get a final grade of C and graduated with my class, and I gained more than respect of my teacher. I gained my own self-respect. I didn't give up when it was hard. I persevered when every single circumstance was against me. Daisy was subversive and a presentable image. She was Gloria Steinem before her time. She was not afraid to be beautiful and brash. I recently watched a documentary about Daisy with my youngest daughter, Mackenzie. She grew up knowing Daisy in her twilight years, but in this documentary, you got to see her as I knew her. She marveled at Daisy's sartorial mastery and confidence. Daisy walked the tightrope between taking time for herself, be it her hair or tailored dresses. Just because she took time to present a well-crafted brand did not mean she was vapid and shallow. Daisy Bates put just as much in her appearance as she did fighting for the voices of the disenfranchised. A lot can be said about a woman at that time that was not afraid to not meet the ideal. Oftentimes, society forces on women what is appropriate. Daisy went against convention. No children, eventually divorced, and then remarrying made her ambitions a priority. That ultimately is what a feminist is, someone who believes in fighting for the right to choose whatever you please and not succumbing to allowing others to force on you their belief of what you should be. Daisy was one of 3 women asked to speak during the March on Washington in 1963. Rosa Parks, Josephine Baker, and Daisy Bates. In fact, a little-known fact is that Daisy Bates followed Martin Luther King, and I had a dream. And some would say Dr. King was a tough act to follow, but Daisy held her own. She didn't shy away from breaking the mold and transcending the opinions people tried to project on her. Now, I have three children, two whom are girls. The women I raised follow in those footsteps. They believe they have the indomitable right to do whatever they choose. Daisy shared with me a story that as a young teenage girl, people often remarked how much she looked like her mother. One day while shopping at the local store, she noticed a white gentleman who appeared intoxicated, staring at her. His eyes watched her wherever she went. She in turn watched him, and which she discovered made him very uncomfortable. She encountered this man every time she shopped for her family. After inquiring, she learned that this man was rumored to have had something to do with her mother's death. Daisy said that going to that store as often as she did, she noticed he began to drink more and more. She wanted him to see the seeds of resilience her mother planted in her. She wanted that man to know that she wasn't broken. She walked in there with her head held high, filled with her mother's spirit. And one day she showed up and he was gone, and she was informed that he had passed away. She thought his death would bring closure, satisfaction, and all it brought was emptiness. She learned that you have to live life, go for your dreams. Don't worry about getting revenge, she said. Leave that to God. Daisy knew that God would call on ordinary people for extraordinary moments. And the miracle isn't meant for the person involved, rather it is to impact those observing the miracle. Now, growing up in Little Rock, we attended Bethel AME Church. I heard the story of the three Hebrew boys locked in the fiery furnace. You know their names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Had faith, they truly believed in God and his miracles. When the king chose to punish them for their defiance to not worship his false idols, they did not lose their faith. The punishment was being thrown in a fiery furnace. The flames from the furnace were so strong that a few guards were killed just trying to open the furnace. They were restrained and forced to their deaths. Someone who lives with a godly spirit thinks differently when faced with certain death. This could be a win-win situation. God would either work in the king's heart, help him find mercy, or they would die and go to the kingdom of heaven. But every so often, God has to flex his muscles. And as my daughter Mackenzie would say, let everyone know he's about that life. God didn't worry about the faith of the three boys. He wanted to instill faith in those observing. The miracle could have been that they were never thrown in the furnace, but what makes it truly miraculous is that they were bound in the furnace, flames dancing around them, and they walked out unscathed. The miracle was really meant for the king, the observers, the gods, and to instill faith in something greater. I remember that day when we were riding to school, seeing the angry faces, people screaming, spitting, cursing, banging on the cars. I looked back at that moment, and that angry mob seemed to almost writhe and thrash like a pit of angry snakes. I remember the cars getting us out of the buildings thinking that the worst was over, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Daisy Bates had an unwavering faith. She permeated the fear we all had. Her strength, calm, composure allowed us to keep our eyes on the prize. God knew we had faith in him, and we saw the win-win situation because of the strong internal foundation our parents helped us build. We were figuratively being bound and thrown into the furnace to the observations of millions all over the world. Now, God delivered us not for our benefit. Like the three boys emerging from that furnace, we were meant to show a miraculous moment to Little Rock the nation and the world. Daisy Bates placed a crack in the glass ceiling. She worked side by side with some of the great minds of that time, people like Thurgood Marshall and A. Philip Randolph. Daisy Bates didn't just hold her own, she led the pack. Daisy taught me an important lesson. And again, quoting that philosopher, Beyonce, who rules the world? Girls. I've had an opportunity today with my wife to go to the Little Rock program on genealogy. And this is Veterans Day, and I want to take an opportunity to recognize and applaud all the veterans, the sacrifices that they made for this country. And while I was at the Little Rock Library, we researched our father's Army history. He served as a corporal in World War I from 1917 to 1919. And he was a part of the 308th Battalion Quartermaster Corps. And we researched the fact that he was in France. He fought in something called the last Battalion. The Argonne Forest in France, 554 men went in, 194 came out. Our father, like many men, never talked about that experience. And when we read the history of it, the Battle of Argonne Forest lasted for 6 days, from October the 2nd, 1918, to October the 6th, 1918. And I imagine my father going to Europe, fighting for democracy in French forests, and yet when he came home, he couldn't vote, he couldn't go into a restaurant, he couldn't sit at a lunch counter. And the dichotomy of that made me think that we all have stories, but we come from strong stock. Daisy Bates, my father, other unknown heroes and heroines that fought for the democracy and expansion of opportunity in this country are the real heroes. They are the people that made this and continue to make this place work, and I think they deserve another applause. So in wishing Daisy Bates a happy birthday, I want to quote Ms. Watson again. She said, "If you believe in equality, you might be one of those inadvertent feminists that I spoke of earlier, and for this I applaud you. We're struggling for a uniting word, but the good news is we have a uniting movement. It is called He for She. I invite you to step forward, to be seen, and to ask yourself, if not me, who? If not now, when? Happy birthday, Daisy."
Great job, Ernie. I'm glad you told people to turn their cell phones back on and to tweet and all that. Next time I'll just tell people to silence them. Terry, Thelma, thank you all for coming. Welcome. We got 3 members of Little Rock 9 here. All right, we have time for a few questions. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and we will get the microphone to you. Do we have a question over here? Do we have someone? Did she raise her hand? Anyone have a question? Where's one? Oh my gosh, of course, the Helen Thomas of the Clinton School, Annie Abrams.
Thank you, Skip. You're getting older too. Good, good to see you, Ernie.
Annie, good to see you.
As I was reflecting as you lived that history, I was thinking of another special day of Daisy. It was the day that she was lying estate at the state capitol, and the daisies that we were giving out from the Martin Luther King Commission. And I told her goodbye, and I came to the White House, where the 9 of you were receiving from Bill Clinton the Congressional Medal of Honor. What was your thought as the first graduate to be in the White House on the day she's being buried, and for her to be lying estate at the state capitol of Arkansas?
Well, I had I don't know how I did it time-wise, but I flew to Little Rock to and get the funeral and got back in time for the recognition. Well, that she really was a part of. She was all of our medals, and that she and Elsie made the ultimate sacrifice. And I think, you know, when we talk about American patriots, she's a real patriot. And hopefully one of the presidents will give her a Medal of Freedom posthumously, because I think she's deserving of it. Skip, before you go to another question, I got about 4 or 5 people that
Go.
Harvey Wiley and his wife, we were in school from the 1st grade to the 11th grade. Lottie Shackelford, Alice Faye, Bonds, they all are my classmates. And they were my anchor. I want to say that they didn't desert me. They stood by me. They were concerned about what was going on and how I was doing, and I owe them a real debt of gratitude. Thank you very much. Where's Phyllis back there?
Phyllis is here.
Where's Phyllis? That's and that Phyllis and that Phyllis. Well, that's Phyllis Brown and Phyllis Green. We got all the rainbow here.
Any questions? Any questions? We got one back here. Yes, she has a question right here. Wait a minute. Here's your microphone.
Did the teachers disrespect you just like the students?
Well, there was a core of teachers who probably wished we weren't there. There were a group of teachers who were fairly benign, and then there were a few teachers that were very helpful. I had a homeroom teacher who really tried to help me navigate that year. I can't put the physics teacher in that category. He spent time trying to help get me out of Central. But I think one of the lessons I think the 9 of us learned, that it was a time in which we wish more people had spoken up and taken a stance and had been supportive of our being there. And I ask you, as we look at problems going forward, don't just stand on the sideline, but get involved and play a role.
Any other questions? There's one. Yes, there's one over here. Yes.
When your great-grandchildren celebrate Daisy Bates' 200th birthday, what will they be able to say about Little Rock, maybe Arkansas?
Well, one of the things they're going to say is that more people are coming back to Arkansas than left Arkansas when I was growing up. Hopefully that this is a place that can figure out how to have a diverse makeup, have a lot of growth, decent jobs, and make people feel very positive about the place. I would, if I were, a stockbroker buying futures on Arkansas, I'd say I'd be bullish on Arkansas. And hopefully they would continue to recognize that Daisy Bates, Little Rock Nine, lots of other people, Annie Abrams, you name, the list goes on, made a real contribution to make this a better place than it was when we came.
Yes, sir, we got a question right back here. Here's your microphone.
Hello, Mr. Green.
How are you?
Just fine, thank you. You said that you had 3 children, right?
Yes.
The question being, what was the most important lesson that you taught your children about your experience?
Well, I think the continuance, persevere, not to be overcome by whatever the problem is at the moment. And that, now, Thelma, Terrence, and I, we have long visions. We knew when we went to Central that 50 years later, we'd still be talking about Central High School. But all jokes aside, we obviously didn't have any idea that it was going to have the impact that it's had. And I think that that's the story you tell your children. They have no idea of what impact they have an opportunity to make on this world, and you just continue to move forward with a positive outlook and a positive agenda.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Ernie Green.
Thank you.